Are you a business owner or entrepreneur who's had great success in the business world, and now you want to launch a speaking career to share your message with the world? If that's you, then listen up. 25-year speaking industry veteran Brett Ridgway has released his latest special report, 3 key things entrepreneurs must master to build a profitable speaking business. To pick up your copy, go to brettridgway.com/freebie. Welcome to the Spotlight on Speaking show with Brett Ridgway, where you'll learn the keys to building a profitable speaking business from speaking industry pros. Each week, we interview a great guest who will share his or her speaking journey, identify what their keys to success have been, and highlight some critical mistakes they've made along the way that you'll want to avoid. Be sure to visit our website at spotlightonspeaking.com. And while you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, sit back, tune in, and get ready to meet this week's guest.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Spotlight on Speaking show. My guest this week is award-winning former basketball coach Jim Johnson. Coach Johnson has developed winning high school basketball teams for 30 years, taking over 3 losing varsity programs and turning them into winners in short periods of time. Of his 428 career victories, one in particular will surely never be duplicated. On February 15, 2006, Coach Johnson made the kind-hearted gesture of inserting his autistic manager, Jason McElwain, now known to the world as J-Mac, into Greece Athena High School's final home game, which the Trojans won convincingly. J-Mac scored 20 points in just over 4 minutes, including 6 three-pointers, to become an instant national celebrity, and Coach Johnson has also been featured in major news outlets as a result. Coach Johnson has now transitioned from basketball coach to keynote speaker. His keynotes and workshops leave people more aware of how they can make a difference in the lives around them. And the inspiration is contagious. And you know better than most that there are many speakers who have leadership topics, but oftentimes these speakers do not have actual leadership experience. Not so with Coach. He has led thousands. Welcome, Coach, to the Spotlight on Speaking show.
Thank you, Brett. I'm looking forward to it. It should be fun.
All right, so let's dive right into the big story behind the scenes, so to speak, which kind of put us all here today in a sense. So I actually saw that video before you ever reached out to me in the first place. So I was familiar with that particular story. So I've got to ask, how's that young man doing today? That's been almost 20 years now, Coach.
Yeah, 18-year anniversary came up this past February. So, yeah, he's doing well. The interesting thing, Brett, is in that game, he was like 5'9", 115 pounds.
Yeah.
Today, he's about 6'2", 170 pounds.
Oh, man.
So he couldn't bench press 75 pounds in high school, and now he bench presses 250. So he actually came back and volunteered in my program for my last 9 years, 2 years after he graduated from high school. So him and I became even closer, and he still lives in the same community. We both live in the biggest suburb of Rochester called Greece, and I still see him not as often because I've retired from coaching, but he's still very close to my heart.
Well, it's a great story, and just for people that want to check it out, what are they searching on YouTube to find that particular video?
So probably the best one is one of the ones I use in my keynotes is the ESPN. If you just Google the JWMAC, JWMAC video, there's a lot of different videos, but ESPN put together like a 5-minute video that shared about the game. That's really powerful, and that's the one I use in a lot of my presentations. So, and it is on my website as well. So,
all right, well, enough about JMac. Let's talk about Coach Jim Johnson now. So, basketball coach many years, led hundreds or thousands of boys over the years in terms of grooming them into better men, learning teamwork, etc. So why the transition from basketball coach to public speaker?
well, it started with I started to get a little bit of speaking because I got really big into personal growth. Became a big fan of Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins, and the list goes on and on. And so I was starting to speak a little bit in the basketball world because I was starting to have some success as a coach. But then, of course, the JMAC game, a serendipitous event, really created some opportunities, and certainly I didn't expect. But people started to reach out. They wanted to hear about this story. So my first presentation that I did for really 9 years, because I spoke part-time for my first 10 years, because I coached 10 more years after that season. And I just did a speech called Dreams Really Do Come True. I wrote a book about it called The Coach and a Miracle, and that was kind of my thing. And I was doing it on the side, didn't know much about the speaking business. Did get some advice. I spoke in an event a couple years after that game in Chicago, and this guy came to me and he said, "Coach, you got a potential to be a great speaker." I said, "Well, thank you." He says, "Are you a member of the National Speakers Association?" And I looked at him like he had two heads because I had no idea what he was talking about. I was a member of basketball associations because I was a coach. But that was a really good bit of advice. I joined, I've been a member 13, 14 years, and I met, some of the best speakers in the world. And so that's helped me both from a platform skills wise and also as well in the speaking business, which I was completely clueless when I started.
So I would assume that you're principally a keynote speaker. You're not doing platform selling or anything. You're being paid a
Right.
fee to go in. So what do you do, coach, to prepare for a speaking engagement to make sure that your message is as on target as possible for that audience? Is it a canned presentation every time that you don't vary in any way? Or do you try to find out more about that particular audience and tweak it in some way to better fit in with their situation?
Well, certainly, when somebody's interested in hiring me, I always do a pre-call in that we go through, like, if it's a conference, what's their theme, and I will tweak. I mean, my basic presentation, my concepts are going to stay the same, but I have different stories depending on the audience. I may share a different scenario or depending, because I've speak to a lot of adult audiences now, but I've also done a lot for students, both high school and college. So, and then, I was really big into leadership. So I developed a leadership presentation, which I do actually more, although it still involves the JMAC story. So the first thing to answer your question specifically is I have a pre-conference call or a speech call with I'm going to a school or a conference or a business or whatever it happens to be, and really find out what they're looking for. And I asked them, how can I make this a home run? What are you looking for? So that I make sure that, because I have a few different keynotes. The other thing I do I'm mainly a keynote speaker, but I do a couple breakouts. I do a breakout on goal setting, a breakout on leadership. So like I've signed a couple deals to speak a couple education conferences next year. And I'm actually one of the keynotes for the conference, but I'm also doing a breakout. So I think it's nice to have, but I also think you got to decide what your most important lane is. And the other thing that I didn't do at all early because I just was clueless, but I really encourage, because I have a lot of young speakers reach out to me because I've been speaking about 18 years now. And I tell them it's really important that you have a post call. And in the post call, I give them some advice. Like one of the things I'll ask them is from 1 to 10, how well did my presentation resonate with what you were looking for? And if I don't get a 10, the nice follow-up is that, let's say I get a 9 or 8 is, well, in your eyes, what could I have done to do better? And that's usually what I'll get some good input. One time I got an 11 out of 10. That was pretty neat, but I usually don't get those. And then the second question I ask is from 1 to 10, how is it working with myself and my speaking manager? And certainly that one I want a 10, and if I get less than a 10, I certainly ask the same question. And if I get high grades on that, then it's something I've learned as I've done the journey is you are in sales, you're trying to sell. So then I'll usually follow up with questions like, is there a way that I can support you going in the future? And if it's running a conference, probably they're not going to bring you back the next year as a keynoter, but maybe I can recommend another keynoter for them, or just another way I can stay in touch. And then the other thing is I'll ask them for a testimonial if I feel like it's something positive. And video testimonials are probably bigger than written, although they're both effective. And then the last thing is I'll ask, is there anybody that you think might be in your network that would be a right fit for me that you can introduce me? Because warm leads are obviously much nicer than uh, cold leads. And then the last thing I'll say about that, Brett, is which again, when I was doing it part-time, I was just clueless as a business person. But now I have a system where I stay in touch with clients, and I do enough other things. Like I do a podcast with a couple other people to help young and emerging leaders called the Limitless Leadership Lounge. I write a weekly blog. I have a monthly newsletter. And I do some other things. I have a video series. So I will try to stay in touch with my network fairly consistently, which is something I did not do very well at all. But by staying in, because I kid leaders now, the 3 R's, you heard in education, writing, reading, and arithmetic is really, it's relationships, relationships, and relationships. And if you can build those and stay in touch, is really powerful as a speaker.
Yeah, so true. And so many people are so weak on nurturing relationships properly. So
Yeah.
obviously in the platform selling world, success is measured in dollars and cents. How do you measure success as a keynote speaker?
For me, it's really seeing the response and then the afterwards of two things. Certainly at the audience, because I like to stay around and talk to people who are in the audience and get their feedback, and certainly when they come up and say that was just awesome. If you get a standing ovation, that's a nice little indication, but not truly the only thing, right? And then the other thing, as I said, is that follow-up call with the meeting planner, whoever brought you in, and really get the feedback, because you may have thought your presentation went pretty well and they thought, it didn't really hit where we were looking for. And that's why I think having that follow-up is so important.
All right, so you're at an event, you're one of many speakers over the course of a couple of days or whatever, and the event promoter comes up to you and says, hey, coach, we're running behind schedule. Can you help us catch up? So now your 60-minute talk is a 30-minute talk. What are you going to do?
Well, that's a great question. Because now I've been speaking for quite a while, I can do that much easier than if it would have been my first couple of years, I would have been in trouble. So I think as a speaker, my advice to people that are looking to get into the speaking world is you really have to know what are your main points. And if that happens, because that definitely has happened to me, and if you speak long enough, it's definitely going to happen to you. Is that you really got to understand, what is the biggest meat and potatoes that you can share, and really have, okay, what can I cut out and still be good at 30 minutes or 20 minutes or 40 minutes? Because you have to cut in and add things in, just like the other way is, if it's a 90-minute keynote, which I do some of those, then I'm doing a few interactive activities where I'm not doing as many of those in just a 45 to 60-minute keynote, just because of time. Just like with a Q&A, well, if they cut your time, you may say, well, why don't we just say, that a coach will be around, and if you have any questions, you come up, where, because you've cut your time, because the Q&A is something you can't define, how long that will take. Sometimes it could be 30 seconds, and sometimes it could be 10 minutes. So, those are some of the things you're trying to make an adjustment. And I'll share one thing, Brett, just because I was at a conference locally here about 4 or 5 years ago. It was actually before the pandemic, so it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And they were all local business people. And some of them were pretty good speakers, and some of them weren't so good. But the huge mistake that I thought the planner is, every single speaker ended with a Q&A. And I really recommend young speakers that, yes, you should offer a Q&A if they're interested, because they get to know you and they might delve into something, but never end with that. I always tell the planner, I'd be glad to do a Q&A. It's going to be towards the end, and I'll give the audience a heads up, but I have a couple compelling stories that I end, and I have a call to action. So I think that's a really mistake that I saw, because there was a few of the speakers at this conference. No one asked a question. They simply walked up the stage. You talk about not leaving any, with any authority or bang. It was pretty bad. So.
All right, well, we're going to spend some more time on the court with the coach in just a second. But before we do, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor.
Are you a business owner or entrepreneur who's had great success in the business world, and now you want to launch a speaking career to share your message with the world? If that's you, then listen up. 25-year speaking industry veteran Brett Ridgway has released his latest special report, 3 key things entrepreneurs must master to build a profitable speaking business. To pick up your copy, go to brettridgway.com/freebie.
And we are back with the Spotlight on Speaking Show. My guest is Coach Jim Johnson. So, Coach, what do you do and it doesn't matter what the topic is, which your speech is doing, but what do you do to most quickly build rapport with an audience?
It's a great thing. In fact, ironically, Brett, earlier, I do a college presentation on how to be a more powerful presenter, and I use the acronym SPEAK, except the K I turned into a C. And one of the things I talk about is the S is how do you start your presentation? And the big thing I talk to them about is how do you capture the attention of the audience as soon as possible? And there's probably multiple ways. I suggest 4. So you want to capture them. Now, I usually start with a video because my video is really powerful. I mean, it captures people's attention very quickly. But then after that video ends, I start right away by engaging the audience by my leadership presentation. I'll say, isn't that the essence of leadership when you shine the light on another teammate? Because the video was all about people embracing JMac's special night. So that's a way that I would capture their audience right away. Another way is just start with a story, which the video in my case is a story, but you could start with your own story or a story that, is along with what you're trying to share with the audience, a key point to get their attention. Another way, as I mentioned, is ask a question just to start. Or another way I like, and I give the example, let's say you're talking about the ills of cigarette smoking, and you start with a startling statistic. Like, I don't know this for a fact, but let's say you say 80% of all lung cancer cases are caused by smoking cigarettes. Now, I haven't looked that up, so I don't know if that's totally accurate. You certainly want to make this statistic accurate. But, that's going to startle an audience, they do like, oh boy, this person knows what he's talking about. And then keeping the audience engaged, storytelling is so essential. Is the kidding in National Speakers Association, do you have to have humor in your presentation? And the response is only if you want to get paid. So you do have to have, you don't have to be a comedian, but you got to have, some little ways that you can make the audience laugh. And I always think you're really had a powerful presentation if you can touch their hearts, make them laugh, and give them a takeaway that they can make their lives better. I think that's a pretty powerful presentation. And then, certainly with getting the audience involved, like I have a group activity that I will do. It's pretty quick. And I also have some partner activities I do, to get the audience involved. So different ways. And then the last thing I'll say with engagement is we always forget as a speaker, even if you speak, I've spoke to 5 people and I've spoke to over 1,000, is you got to make sure that you are making some eye contact. And one advice I give speakers is 3 to 5 seconds, look somebody in the eye and then just kind of gradually move on to someone else. But really try to keep that eye contact because when you can feel like everybody thinks you're talking to them, then it's pretty powerful.
But when you have the bright light shining from the back of the room and you can't see the faces in the audience, you just got to make believe they're there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So, what is your best advice? Well, let's go this route first. So, you mentioned you're a member of the National Speakers Association. So, for somebody just getting started in the industry, is that something you recommend? What's the value there? What's the pros? What's the cons, etc.?
Yeah, as I said, I've been a member. I have not been heavily involved. They have what they call chapters around the country. We don't have one in my area. We started one and it just kind of fizzled. And so I do recommend it if you're in an area, there is a lot of chapters that you could even join the chapter to start because you're going to get some personal attention and meet people, often in person, if, not on Zoom, but, in your area. I do enjoy the National Speakers Association. I would say the great things about it is you got some of the best speakers in the country that are members, and you get to meet them. And when you go to the conferences, they have a lot of good breakouts. The caveat I give people is they think by joining the National Speakers Association that all of a sudden they're going to help you get 50 engagements a year. And that's not the case. You've got to have a business model on how you're doing, to get your engagements. And they will give you some wisdom to help you maybe add to, your business model or your platform skills. But I heard too many people, oh, I thought they're just going to help me get all these engagements. And no, that's not the case.
Well, that leads directly to my next question is what's worked best for you to get speaking engagements?
So it's been a combination of a few things. One is, since I've done a much better job of staying in touch and building relationships, that I try to keep myself in front of mind. Number two is that we post every day on social media. So I'm trying to, anytime I speak, I make sure that I get involved. And then thirdly, making sure that, you're getting testimonials and getting people that will support you, that, where I'm getting introduction. And I do a lot of work on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn, I've connected with a lot of people. I also listen to a lot of podcasts. Like I listened a couple of years, Brett. And you learn, and you can reach out. The thing is, the world is so much smaller now. So if somebody follows you on Twitter or X, or he connects with you on LinkedIn, or whatever, you can connect with them, and then set up calls. Like how I got a couple of the engagements next year is I connected with a couple of superintendents in different states and got to know them. And we do a monthly call, and I'm trying to add value to them. And then they, recommended me, to the person that runs their state association, and that opens some doors. So, building relationships, and it's got to be a consistent thing. We have consistent ways that we reach out and stay in touch, because out of sight, out of mind, as I like to say, right?
All right, so we're going to do a look at both sides of a coin here. So give me your three best tips for being successful as a keynote speaker.
The first one is really getting clarity of who your audience is and how you can serve them. Okay, when you come in with the mindset, because I heard this a long time ago, and there's so much truth in it, is like people ask me, am I nervous? I always still get somewhat nervous. I mean, I coached over 600 high school basketball games, and even we were heavy favorites. I still got nervous before the game, and still. But what my mindset has gotten different with the speaking is I just come in with the mindset, I'm here to serve these people. And that relaxes me and makes that. Number two is having clarity of what they're looking for, and then developing your content and stories so that you can most benefit that. And then once you put that together, it's really having the preparation to practice it. And as I said, I just spoke to a college class. I said, I always go through my, in a couple of these keynotes I've done, dozens of times, yet I still practice them in front of a mirror, sometimes in front of my wife, trying to get different insight from that. And then the other thing I really encourage speakers, because the start and the close are so important, make sure that you even practice those more. In fact, you might even memorize a couple lines. I'm not a big memorize a whole speech. I don't think that I'm much more, I write out my speech and then put them into points. But I think really making sure that you get off to a good start and have a good close and a call to action, I think is really powerful. So I think you got to practice those even more.
All right, so let's look at the other side of the coin, coach, and that is, all right, it's the barrier soul portion here. Share a mistake that you made during your speaking career that left you red-faced at the time, but you learned a good lesson and be something you advise others not to do.
Well, there's certainly, share, because I always kid people that I feel like I'm a pretty confident, good speaker now, but myself and technology are not the best of friends. So there's been times where my video that's embedded now in my PowerPoint didn't work. So, but because early on I used to speak without a PowerPoint, is that I think my advice to you, because that's happened before, is you should be able to give a great presentation with no PowerPoint. Now that, because the one thing I talk to speakers about is, and I've seen some really bad speakers that basically just read their slides. I mean, it's embarrassing. Okay, not too many professional speakers, but like people, like sometimes the CEO of a company that I'm speaking for shares, and basically all they do is read their slides. It's not good. And so I always talk about the PowerPoint should enhance your presentation, not be your presentation. And back early, before I was doing PowerPoints, I used to bring a DVD events. And I remember one time the DVD froze. And fortunately, I had spoke enough where I kind of kidded the audience, and I was ready for that mistake. But I was definitely red-faced because those things. So the big thing that I've learned is especially when technology, which sometimes is not in your control, make sure that you're good enough where you can do a presentation without the technology.
Well, you definitely need to control as much of your speaking environment as you can.
Yes.
And a lot of speakers, I can't stand the hit and run speaker, the guy who rolls in, 5 minutes before he's supposed to
Yeah.
talk. No time for the audio crew to check out his PowerPoint or anything,
Right.
his audio, etc. And then they're out the door just as soon as they're done talking. It's like
Yeah.
that's no way to build a speaking business, in my opinion, anyway. So
I'm 100% with you. One of the things I always share is when somebody hires me is I want to be the easiest, best speaker you work with, and so, whatever I can do to make your experience easier and better for you, that's what I'm here for.
all right, well, Coach, I want to give you a couple minutes now to tell people how they can get involved in your world should they so choose.
Certainly. So probably the best way is coachjimjohnson.com on our website. I work with a lady named Kate that's awesome. So if somebody's interested in hire me to speak, there's all the information on that. We also you can sign up for our weekly blog and monthly newsletter. They're free. I mentioned we have a podcast called the Limitless Leadership Lounge. We have a book also, A Coach in a Miracle, and I'm actually working on a second book that's going to be released here soon. And I'm part of a book on leadership. So those are all things. And I will give my personal email. So certainly if anybody wants to read it, it's coachjimjohnson@gmail.com. And I'm not afraid to give my cell phone out. So if people are interested in reaching out to me, text me or call me, it's 585-764-0220.
All right, very good. Well, thank you so much, Coach, for being my guest on this episode of the Spotlight on Speaking show. I wish you continued success in your speaking career, certainly. And to all the listeners out there, thank you for joining us for this episode. And as always, may this year be your greatest year yet. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
This has been the Spotlight on Speaking show with Brett Ridgway. Be sure to join us every week as we interview speaking industry pros and have them share their best tips for building a profitable speaking business. Until next week, thank you for tuning in, and remember to visit our website at spotlightonspeaking.com so you can enjoy even more great episodes like this one. While you're here, be sure to subscribe via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Spotlight on Speaking show. Until then, our sincere best wishes to you for the greatest of success as you work to build your own profitable speaking business.